Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I pulled into the driveway, my truck rumbling to a halt after weeks on the road. Exhaustion weighed on my shoulders, but a smile tugged at my lips. Home at last. I couldn't wait to surprise Carla, to sweep her into my arms and breathe in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Killing the engine, I grabbed my duffel bag and headed for the front door, my boots crunching on the gravel. As I approached, an unfamiliar pair of men's shoes by the doormat gave me pause. A knot formed in my gut, but I pushed it aside. Maybe Carla had a friend over. With my key in the lock, I twisted it slowly, easing the door open to avoid making a sound. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, I spotted another pair of shoes, expensive loafers. Definitely not a friend's. My pulse quickened as I crept down the hallway, each step more unsettling than the last. Reaching the bedroom door, I steadied my breath and pushed it open. The sight that greeted me shattered my world into a million pieces. There, tangled in our sheets, was Carla. My Carla, locked in a passionate embrace with a man I didn't recognize. His naked back glistened with sweat as he moved on top of her, her fingers raking down his spine. I stood there, frozen, my bag slipping from my grip and hitting the floor with a dull thud. Carla's eyes snapped open, locking with mine. "Marcus!" she gasped, shoving the man off her as she clutched the sheets to her chest. The man whipped his head around, panic etched across his face. He scrambled for his clothes, muttering curses under his breath. "What the hell is going on here?" I roared, my voice trembling with rage. Carla opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears streamed down her flushed cheeks as she shook her head, her eyes pleading with me. The man, now hastily dressed, stepped forward. "Look, man, I'm sorry. This wasn't." "Get out," I snarled, cutting him off. "Get the fuck out of my house before I put you through the goddamn wall." He held up his hands in surrender, backing away slowly. "Hey, no need for violence, pal. I'm going." As he brushed past me, the scent of his cologne wafted into my nostrils, igniting a fresh wave of fury. I resisted the urge to grab him, to make him pay for what he'd done. Once he was gone, I turned my attention back to Carla, who sat huddled on the bed, her body racked with sobs. "Marcus, please," she choked out. "I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake." "A mistake?" I spat, my fists clenching at my sides. "You think this was a goddamn mistake? Lying in our bed with another man, that's not a mistake, Carla. That's a conscious choice to betray everything we had." She flinched at the venom in my words, her eyes squeezing shut as if to block out the reality of what she'd done. "I want you out of here," I said, my voice low and trembling. "Pack your things and go stay with your parents. I can't even look at you right now." "No, please, Marcus, don't do this," she pleaded, reaching for me. I recoiled from her touch, the sight of her naked body only fueling my disgust. "You did this, Carla, not me. Now get dressed and get the hell out of my house." With a broken sob, she nodded and began gathering her clothes, her movements robotic and lifeless. I stormed out of the bedroom, unable to bear another second in that room, the stench of their betrayal suffocating me. The next morning, I found myself on Aiden Monroe's doorstep, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel during the drive over. Rage still simmered in my veins, but I knew I needed to keep my cool for now. A woman answered the door, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Can I help you? Is Aiden here?" I asked, my jaw clenched. "Yes, but who are?" "Marcus Langford," I said, cutting her off. "The husband of the woman he was screwing last night." Her eyes widened, realization dawning on her features. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You're Jessica, aren't you? Aiden's wife?" She nodded, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. "I've got proof," I told her, fishing out my phone and pulling up the explicit photos Carla and Aiden had exchanged that I took from her cloud account. "Look," Jessica gasped, her face contorting in anguish as she scrolled through the images. "That lying son of a bitch," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "Aiden," she bellowed, whirling around and storming into the house. "Get your ass out here right now." Moments later, Aiden appeared, his expression a mixture of confusion and dread as he took in the scene before him. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze flitting between Jessica and me. "Don't play dumb with me," Jessica snarled, shoving the phone in his face. "You've been screwing this man's wife, you piece of garbage." Aiden's face drained of color as he sputtered for an explanation, but Jessica wasn't having it. "I want a divorce," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "And I'm taking you for every goddamn penny you're worth." Panic flashed across Aiden's features, and he made a move toward Jessica, his hands outstretched as if to grab her. Without thinking, I stepped forward and landed a solid punch to his jaw, sending him reeling backward. "Don't you dare touch her," I growled as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his face. Jessica turned to me, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "And I'm sorry you had to go through this too. But we'll make them pay, I promise." I nodded, the weight on my shoulders lifting ever so slightly. At least now I had an ally in this nightmare. As Aiden groaned and cursed from the floor, Jessica and I exchanged a knowing look. The battle was only just beginning. A week had passed since that fateful night, and the ache in my chest had only grown deeper. I knew I needed to take action, to expose Carla's betrayal to those closest to us. With a heavy heart, I reached out to our families and arranged a gathering at Carla's parents' house. They were understandably confused by the urgency of my request, but I assured them it was a matter of utmost importance. As our loved ones trickled in, the atmosphere was thick with curiosity and unease. Carla sat huddled on the couch, her eyes puffy and rimmed with red. No doubt from the lies she'd been feeding everyone about her sudden stay with her parents. Once everyone had arrived, I cleared my throat and stood, commanding the room's attention. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice teetering on the edge of composure. "I know you must be wondering what this is all about." I paused, steeling myself for what was to come. "The truth is, Carla and I are getting divorced." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a chorus of hushed murmurs and concerned glances. "Marcus, what happened?" Carla's mother asked, her brow furrowed with worry. I took a deep breath, locking eyes with Carla. "I caught her in bed with another man." Silence fell over the gathering like a heavy shroud, broken only by Carla's choked sobs. "No, no, it can't be true," her father muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and began passing it around, displaying the explicit photos and messages Carla had exchanged with her lover. As the evidence made its way around the room, the atmosphere shifted from shock to outrage. Carla buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with each ragged breath. "How could you do this, Carla?" her sister cried, glaring at her with undisguised contempt. "To Marcus, to all of us?" One by one, our loved ones voiced their disappointment and disgust, until their words melded into a cacophony of condemnation. Through it all, I remained silent, letting the weight of Carla's actions speak for itself. Finally, she lifted her head, her eyes red and pleading as she turned to me. "Marcus, please, I'm so sorry," she begged, her voice cracking. "I made a horrible mistake, but I love you. Please give me another chance." I shook my head, my jaw set in grim determination. "There are no second chances for this, Carla. Not after what you've done." As our families and friends looked on in solemn support, I knew there was no turning back. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and it was time to move forward, no matter how painful the road ahead might be. Just when I thought the worst was over, a bombshell hit in the form of legal notices from Carla and her lover, Aiden. They were suing me for assault and emotional distress, claiming I had no right to confront them the way I did. Anger and disbelief surged through me as I stared at the documents, my hands trembling. After everything they'd put me through, they had the audacity to try and twist the narrative in their favor. I knew I needed legal counsel, and there was only one person I trusted implicitly, my sister Angela. Angela was a force to be reckoned with in the courtroom, a brilliant mind with a sharp tongue and an unwavering sense of justice. When I laid out the situation for her, her eyes narrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Those snakes have another thing coming if they think they can slither their way out of this, she snarled, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of her desk. Over the next few days, Angela and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and crafting our defense. We had the explicit messages and photos, yes, but we also had Jessica's testimony about Aiden's attempt to assault her when I intervened. We'll argue that you were acting in defense of Jessica, and that any emotional distress Carla experienced was a direct result of her own actions, Angela explained, her voice brimming with confidence. As the court date loomed closer, we went over every detail, every possible scenario, until we were both convinced we had an ironclad case. The morning of the trial, Angela and I stood side by side, our spines ramrod straight as we entered the courtroom. Carla and Aiden were already seated, their faces pale and drawn. "You ready for this?" Angela murmured, giving my arm a reassuring squeeze. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "Let's burn those bastards." The courtroom crackled with tension as the proceedings began. Angela wasted no time in laying out our case, her words sharp and precise as she dissected the evidence piece by damning piece. When it was Carla and Aiden's turn, their lawyers tried to paint me as a hot-headed brute, driven by jealousy and rage. But Angela was ready, countering their arguments with cold, hard facts and Jessica's unwavering testimony. As the drama unfolded, the judge watched with impassive eyes, her gaze occasionally flickering to the explicit messages displayed on the overhead screen. Each time they appeared, Carla flinched as if struck, her face flushing with shame. Finally, it was time for the closing arguments, and Angela rose to her feet, her presence commanding the entire room. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear," she began, her voice ringing with conviction. "My client's actions, while perhaps ill-advised, were a justifiable response to the egregious betrayal he suffered at the hands of his wife and her lover." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "To sue him for assault and emotional distress is not only a gross misrepresentation of the facts, but a blatant attempt to shift the blame and avoid taking responsibility for their own actions." Angela's gaze swept over Carla and Aiden, her eyes hard as flint. "They made their bed, Your Honor. Now it's time for them to lie in it." As she took her seat, a hush fell over the courtroom, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. After what felt like an eternity, the judge cleared her throat and delivered her verdict. "While Mr. Langford's actions were indeed regrettable, I find that they were committed in the heat of the moment and in defense of another individual," she stated, her tone measured. "As such, I am sentencing him to a minimal term for minor assault, to be served concurrently with probation." Relief washed over me as the judge continued, denying Carla and Aiden's claims and admonishing them for their blatant attempt to evade responsibility. As we left the courtroom, Angela pulled me into a fierce hug, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Marcus," she whispered. "You stood your ground, and justice prevailed." In that moment, I knew the worst was behind me. The road ahead might be long and winding, but at least I could walk it with my head held high, unburdened by the weight of lies and deceit. In the aftermath of the courtroom drama, the shockwaves of Carla and Aiden's affair rippled through our lives, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. It started with their jobs. Word of their sordid affair spread like wildfire, and within days, they were both summarily dismissed, their reputations in tatters. "Serves those snakes right," Angela spat when I told her the news, her lip curling with disdain. But the fallout didn't stop there. One by one, our friends and family members began cutting ties with Carla and Aiden, appalled by their actions and the hurt they had caused. Carla tried to reach out to me, her messages and calls filled with desperate pleas for forgiveness, for a chance to explain. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound she'd inflicted still too raw, too agonizing. Even Aiden's own family turned their backs on him, his parents and siblings severing all contact in the wake of his betrayal. As the weeks passed, the isolation seemed to take its toll on them both. Carla's once bright eyes grew hollow and haunted, her smiles forced and brittle. Aiden, too, looked like a shell of his former self, his usual cocky swagger replaced by a hunched, defeated demeanor. But I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for them. They had made their choices, and now they were reaping the consequences. A month after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from Carla. "Marcus, please," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I need to see you one last time. I know you hate me, and I don't blame you, but I have to try, for my own peace of mind." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her in the park near our old house, a neutral ground, far from the memories that still haunted me. When I arrived, she was already there, perched on a bench and wringing her hands anxiously. She looked up as I approached, her eyes rimmed with red, and stood on shaky legs. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her gaze downcast. I said nothing, folding my arms across my chest as I waited for her to continue. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, her voice trembling. "What I did was unforgivable, and I'll carry that guilt with me for the rest of my life." She lifted her head, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But I need you to know how truly sorry I am. How much I regret throwing away everything we had for a moment of selfish weakness." A sob escaped her lips, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to compose herself. "I loved you, Marcus," she choked out. "I loved you with every fiber of my being, and I destroyed that love with my own foolish choices. If I could go back and undo it all, I would in a heartbeat." I stood there, my jaw clenched, as she poured out her heart, laying her soul bare before me. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I know that ship has sailed, but I'm begging you, from the bottom of my heart, to find it in you to forgive me one day. Not for my sake, but for your own." She took a shuddering breath, her gaze boring into mine with an intensity that made my heart clench. "You deserve to be free of this pain, Marcus. You deserve to move on and find happiness again, untainted by the ghosts of our past." With those words, she stepped forward and pressed something into my hand. A simple silver band, our wedding ring. "Goodbye, Marcus," she whispered, her fingers lingering on mine for a moment before she turned and walked away, her shoulders hunched and trembling. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the ring burning a hole in my palm, as I watched her retreating figure until it disappeared from sight. In the months that followed, I focused all my energy on rebuilding my life, piece by shattered piece. With Angela's guidance, I navigated the legal and emotional aftermath of the divorce, slowly but surely reclaiming a sense of stability and peace. And through it all, I found an unlikely ally in Jessica. We had bonded over our shared pain and betrayal, and as we both worked to move on from our respective marriages, we leaned on each other for support. What started as occasional coffee catch-ups soon blossomed into a deep, unwavering friendship. Jessica understood me in a way few others did, having walked the same treacherous path I had. "We made it through hell and back," she said to me one evening over glasses of whiskey in my new apartment, "and we came out stronger on the other side." Her words rang true. The scars of Carla and Aiden's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had tempered us, forged us into tougher, wiser versions of ourselves. As time passed, the pain began to dull, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I no longer defined myself by my past, but by the man I was becoming. A man who had stared into the abyss and emerged with his head held high. And whenever the ghosts of my old life threatened to resurface, I had Jessica by my side, her steadfast presence a reminder that I was not alone. We had survived the unthinkable, and now, side by side, we were ready to embrace whatever the future had in store. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.